What's up, guys? We're back. Today, gonna be going over the upset picks for the 2023 March Madness bracket. As usual, let's get straight into it. Gotta go over 5-12 first. I mean, everyone's picking Charleston over South or San Diego State. I do agree with most. Like I feel like Charleston definitely can get a win over San Diego State. The only thing is, last year we saw everyone picking UAB over Houston and what was the other 12 over 5? Indiana over St. Mary's, and neither of those happened. It was actually the other two. So I feel like you can't really go with the most popular 12. Um, but again, it could happen. I would personally go with like the second and third most popular 12 over 5s, which I think actually in the people's bracket, the most popular 12 over 5 is VC over St. Mary's. So that is one that I might avoid. And I might go with a Drake over Miami, or maybe even an Oral Roberts over Duke. This one is definitely more questionable because Duke is very, very hot right now, and they've put things together where Oral Roberts, you know, I just don't know if they'll be able to take him down. But go back to the bracket. Um, so I'm gonna say maybe avoid this one as just like the standard 12 over 5. And then if you're looking at 13 over 4s, I got either Furman over Virginia, just because Virginia I just don't believe in much. They have too many losses. They're too inconsistent. Um, they lost their, I think, center in Ben Vanderhalas. Um, yeah, Furman, they're not a strong 13, but they're definitely one that, can't be taken lightly. I feel like they could definitely beat Virginia. So that's one that I might have. Um, Then the only 14 over 3 I see is either this one in UC Santa Barbara versus Baylor, just because Baylor is kind of cold right now. They lost in the first round against Iowa State in their respective conference tournament, while UCSB obviously won theirs. Um, they just don't have much good competition. UCSB, while Baylor obviously is playing in the best conference in basketball right now. So that's one I might pick. Or I'm feeling a little more confident in this one, Kansas State losing to Montana State. Montana State is probably the worst team compared to UC Santa Barbara, but Kansas State is also the worst team compared to Baylor. They also are cold. They lost in the first round of the Big 12 conference tournament. They lost to TCU. And Montana State, obviously, they didn't have the hardest run in their Big Sky conference tournament, but they have a really go-to player in Raekwon Battle. He is definitely a solid guy. He can kind of carry the team at times, and their big men are good enough. It's a mid-major, so you can't really look at their team and be like, oh yeah, they have a really good starting five. It's like they got good players here and there. So if you're gonna pick a 14 over 3, I'd pick one of those two, either Montana State over Kansas State or UCSB over Baylor, just because Xavier and Kennesaw State's one of the weaker teams in this bracket altogether. So I feel like Xavier will be able to get it done there. And then Gonzaga, Grand Canyon. As much as I might want to see Grand Canyon win, Gonzaga is probably the strongest 3 seed. So it just kind of sucks that GCU got the hardest matchup of the 3 over 14s. Then with 15 seeds, I don't really see any of them winning. If you had to pick one, I would maybe say Colgate over Texas, but I have Texas winning it all in my bracket, so I don't think they're going to lose to Colgate. It just sucks that they got matched up against the best 15 seed, because I could have seen Colgate be maybe a 14 seed, and that would have made sense to me. Colgate does shoot the lights out. The only thing is, when you live by the 3, you can also die by the 3 really easily, so definitely not a team that I would pick. But if you really need to pick a 15 over 2, it's either this one or Princeton over Arizona. Just because Princeton isn't a bad 15 seed. I mean, they're solid. They're just not, again, against Arizona, I don't see it. Because then Vermont over Marquette, I doubt it. And UNC Asheville over UCLA, I don't really see it. Any other upsets? I mean, 11 over 6, if you count that as like a big upset, I might have ASU over TCU, just because usually one of the first four teams wins their first game, and ASU is definitely a solid team. TCU is probably one of the weaker sixes too, so I would have maybe ASU moving on there. Or you could go with, I don't see NC State beating Creighton because I just really like this Creighton team, and as well as this Kentucky Providence. I don't see it because I just really like this Kentucky team, and Providence has just kept falling down and down. So I would say either this game for the first four or this Mississippi State Pitt versus Iowa State, just because Iowa State is one of the weaker six seeds. Um, the Big 12 teams, they are really good, but then some of them can be overseeded because they just have like good wins. I think Iowa State beat Kansas and they also beat Texas, so they have really good wins. But altogether, I don't really like them as much as a team, and they lost Caleb Grill for whatever reason he had. So I might pick Mississippi State over them, but both of these first four teams, I realistically don't see them beating Iowa State. Now with the 12s, I would not go with this one just because it's the consensus of 12 over 5. I would maybe stay away from that one. Drake over Miami is definitely one to look into just because Miami has lost Norchad Omier, their starting center. And while Drake, they have a go-to guy in Tucker DeVries, and usually these upset teams have go-to guys or just all-around solid like 4 or 5 man rotation. So yeah, Drake. I mean, Tucker DeVries very very good. They got Roman Penn. Miami still has great guard play with Isaiah Wong. They got Nigel Pack, and they have Jordan Miller amongst that. And I do personally really like this Miami team, but they also played in a very weak ACC, and Drake's just pretty hot right now. So that's definitely a 12 to look at. And then another 13 over 4 is possibly Kent State over Indiana, because Kent State is the best 13 seed in this bracket for sure. Best defensive team maybe in the entire NCAA tournament. They have a point guard that carries them, Sincere Carey. Last name's Carey, of course he carries them. And you got Indiana. They got Trey Jackson Davis, Jalen Chifino among their other rotational guys, but I feel like they might rely on those two too much. So where if they don't have good games, they might be kind of screwed. So this is another 13 seed that I might have winning. I had it winning in my own bracket. So yes, definitely look at Kent State over Indiana. And then Louisiana over Tennessee. As much as I don't like Tennessee, I don't see them losing to Louisiana. I personally like Louisiana's probably the weakest of the 13 seeds, while Tennessee is probably, not the weakest of the fours, but they are just too inconsistent to me. And although they are very good analytics wise, I wouldn't have them moving past the Sweet. I would have them at most making the Sweet 16 and then losing there. Just like I wouldn't move them past the Sweet 16 for sure. But this still, I wouldn't have them losing to Louisiana. Same thing over here, UConn, Iona. UConn is an inconsistent team. UConn's probably one of the best teams in all of college basketball. Iona is also a very good 13 seed. Rick Pitino and just coaching them will definitely lead them to make this probably a close game, but I don't see them beating them. So it's 1/3. So the two 13 seeds I might look at are Furman and Kent State to win their games over Virginia and Indiana. It's just a tough matchup because if it was Kent State versus Tennessee, then I would have Kent State beat Tennessee. But since Indiana, this one definitely is a little harder to pick. And then there's usually probably, I would say, one or two. I'd say there's one 13 seed usually winning, and then two 12 seeds usually winning. So we already got Drake. So I would probably pick. This is the consensus most popular one, VCU over St. Mary's. So I might stay away from this one. But that's also intriguing just because VCU definitely can't beat St. Mary's because they're both on a little bit of a good run. St. Mary's play style is obviously weird, and anytime you go against it, it's going to be hard to beat. The VCU also is a very, very good team. They played great in that championship game against Dayton. So, definitely look at picking VCU over St. Mary's. And if you're not going to do that, and you don't even have any 12 seeds, you think all the 5 seeds are good enough, but you're worried about this one, I would definitely go with Oral Roberts if you have not picked any other 12 over 5s. But if you've already picked Charleston to win, if you've already picked Drake to win, I would pick Duke because Duke is probably the best 5 seed. And Oral Roberts, it just sucks that these two got matched up against each other because Oral Roberts, Max Asmus, great scorer, and they have a 7'5" center who is 7'5". So, against Duke, they could win, but this is definitely one of those toss-up games where it's like, I don't fully know. This is the least popular 12 over 5, but that's mainly just because it's Duke. So you might want to go with Oral Roberts just because it's the least popular. And Oral Roberts is a very good team. And then with like second round upsets, with like if you have Purdue and Memphis moving on, I would definitely look at Memphis beating Purdue just because Memphis is on a hot streak right now. Kendrick Davis, DeAndre Williams, they got great guys. While Purdue mainly relies on obviously Zach Edey because he's a National Player of the Year. He's 7'4". So Memphis probably doesn't have anyone to guard Zach Edey, but if they get him in foul trouble and get him out of his game, they could definitely win that game. So I could have Memphis beating Purdue. Same thing over here if you have Kansas, Arkansas. Arkansas is definitely a team to look at. Beat Kansas. I know the record isn't that good, but the best thing to have in March is great guard play, and Arkansas has honestly too many guards. They got Ricky Council IV. They got Anthony Black, Nick Smith Jr., among other great guards. I think they have Devontae Davis too. Yeah, they got a great team over there. One of the best lineups in all of college basketball, and as an 8 seed, that's got to be scary. Kansas is very, very good. Again, they're a 1 seed, of course. They won last year, but just they've been blowing games to Texas at the end of the season, and they have a couple questionable losses, I would say. Arkansas does as well, but if you wanted to pick an 8 over 1 and you think Purdue is too good, I would pick Arkansas over Kansas if you have it like this. But I personally have Kansas winning and then Memphis winning. But I could definitely see something like this happen. But then up here with the 1 over 9s or 1 over 8s, I wouldn't pick it. I think Alabama and Houston are too good for either of these teams. So I would leave those 2 1 seeds to make the Sweet 16. And then any other like 10 over 2s, I wouldn't pick anyone to beat UCLA. Northwestern or Boise State, neither of these teams I feel like are good enough to win. So I would have UCLA moving past that. Would have UCLA in my Sweet 16. Then we got Marquette, Michigan State. This is one of those. If it's UCSC or if you have USC moving on, definitely pick Marquette. But Michigan State, they are definitely a team that could pose threats to Marquette, and I might have them moving on there. That's one of those 7 over 2 upsets I could see. Up here, I wouldn't see Utah State beating Arizona. Cool thing about Utah State is that they have UMBC's head coach from back in 2018 when they made that run. They also have, I think, on the starting center of this Utah State team, they have that starting center that won that UMBC game. But I don't see them having an upset here. I would have Arizona winning. And then over here is definitely something to look at. Texas is probably my strongest 2 seed, but against an underranked Texas A&M or underseeded Texas A&M team or a Penn State team that's on a roll, I could see either of these teams beating Texas and making honestly a Final Four run. Both of these teams are very dangerous. I would probably have Texas A&M moving on though. So if you didn't want to pick Michigan State over Marquette, I would definitely look at a Texas A&M over Texas. Other than that, Cinderella teams, I mean, it's like you can maybe have Kent State to the Sweet 16, Texas A&M up to the possible Final Four, Memphis maybe to the Final Four. If not Memphis, maybe you have Arkansas. So yeah, I mean, those are mainly my upset picks. I would say go-to upset picks would definitely be Drake over Miami, Kent State over Indiana. I definitely look at those, um, as well as looking at Oral Roberts over Duke. And then if you wanted to pick a 14, I would look at either Montana State over Kansas State or UCSB over Baylor. So yeah, that is all for today. Like and subscribe if you want. Other than that, I will see you guys later.